the FIFA Women's World Cup logo. These are the only two sort of logo slash refreshers slash brands we have to talk about this week. Been a bit light on that sort of news lately.
Yeah, I think we had a week a couple of weeks ago that had like 6 or 7 massive rebrands, and since then it's just been absolutely quiet.
Yeah, but that's it's just maybe that time of year everyone sort of got it out of the way prior to the Christmas period potentially.
Mhm.
Um, so this one here is sort of showing the France 2019 logo next to the AU NZ or Australia New Zealand 2023 logo. I I think historically I've found the World Cup logos, much like the Olympics, much like any sort of sports event, quite an interesting study in how you represent something like that visually as a logo, because really it doesn't change that much. I mean, you change the country, but you don't change much else.
Mhm.
So to me, it's a bit complicated, this new one.
Yeah. When I saw it, like I'm not familiar with football, soccer, whatever you call it. That's not really my sport. I'm definitely into other sports more so. So I'm coming from a very outside perspective, but I think every time I see FIFA World Cups or women's football World Cups, they seem to be quite complicated to me. And this one in particular, I mean, coming from Australia and also being familiar enough with New Zealand, I don't know what the connection is with the colours. I don't really know what that's trying to communicate. I can see that it's a
Here we go.
soccer, football in there. What are the colours saying?
Okay, so let's look into it. So there's squares representing 32 countries that will compete for the World Cup. Then there's colors. They're calling them shared colors. Australia and New Zealand are home to some of the world's most distinct and inspiring natural landscapes and world-class cities. The color palette is vibrant and unique, going beyond the host flags and drawing from the rainforest, earth, mount. Gosh, so they're just saying that they're just colors that are everything to everyone. Um,
Yeah.
there's then a football at the core that,
Mhm.
and it's all a circle because it's representing coming together. Then there's bold typography underneath all. I've already described 4 different elements, and then there's bold typography underneath that, and then there's a simplified version of the World Cup trophy, that the Women's World Cup trophy, and then
Mhm.
further on underneath that there's the AUNZ 2023 wording, with underneath that, half of that sort of area is the New Zealand artistic pattern, whatever that means, and the Australian artistic pattern, whatever that means as well. I think, oh man, you you would think that this was designed by a uni student, especially the way that they've brought in how many different elements, and not
Yeah.
just uni students, but come on.
It feels like there was an assignment brief that, tick off all these symbolistic elements. And I think that this is a case of what seems to happen a lot when it comes to these kind of like sporting competitions and things. They just get so complicated because they're trying to do so much, like representing all the countries, representing 2 different countries' patterns going into the earth and rainforests and seas and all of that sort of stuff, and just doing so much. And I don't know if it needs to be that complicated. Like, I don't hate it. It's not sort of super offensive to look at, but I just don't know why it has to be so complicated.
There's also a lot, like they've built out a lot of visual imagery. I think I thought I saw further up that it was designed by, the identity for the ninth edition has been designed by LA based Works Collective, and then they collaborated with a Toronto based
What?
agency, which
Why
I'm
is it,
sorry,
if we're
but
coming to Australia, New Zealand, why are we not employing, I don't know, Aboriginal artists or something? I mean, I'm sure they would have had to for part of it, but
well,
why
yeah,
why are we
further
using
down.
American based companies for
For the
this.
North American, yeah. I just don't. So yeah, that they apparently worked with this Australian Indigenous, potentially, I think Indigenous artist,
Hmm.
and this Kiwi artist again. I think maybe Maori. I don't know. I mean, there's no way to say, and I'm not going to make any assumptions. Um, yeah, she's just referenced as, well, they're both referenced as local artists. Um,
Why are we not employing local companies,
Agency, we've got the
agencies to do
ability,
this?
and I do feel like they really missed the mark here, because this shape, the for those who are not watching, it's essentially like a round circular shape that vaguely represents a soccer ball or football, that also has a bunch of colors that's supposed to represent apparently everything, and then 32 little squares around that's supposed to represent the nations being involved. Like, to me, that alone is too much for a logo,
Yeah,
let alone then jumping with the wording underneath and then finally representing Australia and New Zealand in a way that I think is quite weak. Um,
yeah. They've kind of just thrown that pattern behind the AUNZ and the 2023 to say, yep, here's the country's stuff. And I know that they say that the colours are in the circular part, the colours of, I don't know, I guess rainforests and pink salt
so
lakes, maybe.
the actual occurrences that almost every continent can say that they have.
Yeah. I
It's not
just,
unique. Like, the rainforests are not unique to Australia.
no. We've got some beautiful
The
ones, absolutely, but there's many countries that do.
100%, you may have heard of the Amazon before. Um, it's
Mm,
sort of a very popular rainforest. Yeah, I just don't know. I feel like generally it's very hard to comment on branding for things like World Cups and sporting events, because what do you represent? It's the same thing every X amount of years. Um, and you need to then look at what is unique about that. And to me, that is where it's being hosted. It can't be who's being involved, because that is often not finalized until there's playoffs and so on and so forth. Um, Overall, they've yeah. If you look at sort of the supporting design, I guess you would call it, they've really missed the mark. Like, they're calling out rainforests, water, world class cities, mountains. Like, what
it's all very
is that what very generic? Is that we could have
mm,
applied all of this to any other country or city in the world. And then the only unique part is the beautiful, beautiful sort of local art from Australia and New Zealand that is genuinely beautiful. Potentially the challenge or the risk that they didn't want to, well, because they're from overseas, they don't understand what the local market's going to sort of accept. Maybe they didn't want to go too much the other way, potentially,
mm,
but a very easy way to avoid that is just to get local artists from each of the nations to collaborate. Australia, New Zealand, we collaborate all the time. Australia steals Kiwi actors and actresses and technologies and claims them for our own. I'm sure we could
yeah.
have found a way to work together. It's just don't
Mm,
understand. But a message, I think, here to just work with organizations who have relevant market knowledge. I mean, when we get asked to work with um, you know individuals from overseas for overseas markets, it's something that I hesitate to do, because we just don't have. I mean, we can apply general knowledge, like we've got. I would say, we'd be better than sort of someone with less experience, but still not as good as someone who's got local experience.
yeah. There's so many case studies that I've read of massive companies trying to branch out into a new country and just not understanding the marketing and this, like the everything. Like I think it even happened. I mean, it's slightly different, but the Five Guys burger chain that opened up in Australia, and Australians just went, "This is rubbish," like because we love our burgers. And I think Five Guys just didn't understand that, and they didn't adapt their offering to understand the Australian market. And that's coming from quite a large chain. Like it can happen so easily just because you don't
Starbucks is,
work
I think,
with
another
the
example.
local. Exactly. Yeah. They just didn't do the correct research. And it even happened, I think, when Bunnings opened up in the UK. There just wasn't a demand for it. They didn't do their research. It flopped pretty hard. And it was just a case of work with the local markets, work with local agencies, whoever it is, to actually understand what's going on. Don't just assume the model that's working in one country will work in another. It's just not going to happen.
I think it's a great example too of, you know, Australia is part of the West as a generic sort of collective term, and a lot of people think the West is the same. Like, you know, you can go to the US, you can go to the UK, and you can go to Australia and parts of Europe and get the people are sort of similar and have a similar reaction, but this is a reminder that that's not the case. Even in Australia, between Sydney and Canberra, um, we're 3 hours apart. But I would say, you know, in some cases, we're completely different individuals, and how we like things is completely different. Um, I'm not happy with it. I don't think as a football fan it just does too much and gets
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. I think that's an interesting juxtaposition with the Qatar logo, where Qatar just didn't bother trying to represent everything and instead used the sort of other elements and used the opportunity to expand upon it, and did it really, really well.